AAA video games have been getting a lot of criticism lately, mostly because they deserve it. But within all of the analysis that we do of them, I think there's one very important thing that we don't talk about, and that is hubris. Environments of toxic positivity, where these people are protected and told that everything they are doing is right, where their ambition is not held in check, and where the viability of these games and the audience that they are meant to please are ignored. And the current state of companies like Ubisoft, studios like Bethesda Game Studios, and the recent leaks surrounding Concord indicate that this is becoming a bigger thing within the industry than you might think. And the consequences of it are pretty serious. Now, just in case you're like me and you kind of know what the word hubris means, but you don't know the definition, it means extreme self-confidence. Basically, having your ego so big at this point that it has its own gravitational pull. And the current problem isn't just that these egos currently exist or that they go unchecked, it's that many times they're encouraged and the environments for them to grow bigger is what publishers are providing. And so this video is divided into 3 different parts. We're going to take a quick look at Ubisoft, the current biggest villain in gaming, because I think hubris has a lot to do with their business practices and the decisions that they've made with their games. We're also going to take a look at Concord, because I know I'm a little bit late to the news, but a lot of the information from the development of Concord confirms all of these things. And while we're there, we're also going to talk about a couple of other live service games. And finally, we're going to talk about Bethesda Game Studios, because I think hubris plays a very important part in their current downfall. With all of that out of the way, I'm Mug. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. And remember that if you like what I have to say, if you think this video is interesting, hitting the like button helps the channel grow and helps this video reach more people, just as well as subscribing. And now a cool transition to some spy jazz. Now we're starting off at Ubisoft because I think that they're currently at the forefront of people's minds, and a lot of the information regarding Ubisoft and what they've done over the last 10 years is very fresh. And while we're not going to spend too much time discussing Ubisoft, I think it's really important to show how hubris can end up forming in an already existing studio, and this is going to help a lot when we reach Bethesda. We've said many times that Ubisoft has been told over and over and over again over the last 10 years what they should do if they want to recapture the magic and therefore the success of their games from generations past, and how they completely ignore it. And I think it's important to understand that they ignore it because they still see results. While hindsight can be 20/20, and I think Ubisoft currently are understanding that they have made a lot of wrong decisions over the years, Ubisoft as a company, when it comes to its business practices and the way that they failed to innovate on their games or evolve their formulas, is because they keep making money. Sure, the equation isn't that simple, and the truth is that Ubisoft has been failing. They haven't grown to the same size as the rest of the market over time, but the truth is that no matter how many times they're criticized, their next games still do perfectly okay. They still make more money as they push more and more aggressive microtransactions. And if there's an easy, guaranteed way for the arrogance of hubris to come in, is for you to be repeatedly told that what you're doing is wrong, for you to do it anyways, and then still see success. It creates this attitude of, it doesn't matter what other people think, I'm right. Everybody else is wrong. I'm making the right decisions here. I'm so smart, even when you're not. But the thing I really wanted to highlight about Ubisoft is the change in attitude that comes with hubris and how it becomes pretty easy to identify. We used to see them talk about prioritizing fun and creating interesting games and things like historical accuracy, sure, being a priority that they would focus on from the start, but never the center point. And they would openly admit that they would make changes and reinterpret things as long as it led to a good video game, which is very different to the Ubisoft of today, that now that we have more information, we know did not have the historians necessary to actually make things accurate in a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows, and on top of not having them through interviews and marketing, have insisted not just that they are being very historically accurate, but they are being authentic, and that it's a priority for them to make that a reality. And that's a huge shift in attitude, in the tone, in the marketing, and I think that's something that is also reflected within the games they make. This righteous, holier-than-thou feeling where they communicate that they are right and we are wrong. And we are not allowed to argue because they have the final say and they say they're right. What a surprise there. Those sort of comments, that sort of vocabulary can only come from people who are severely out of touch, and they are like that because their egos have swollen to sizes that shouldn't be allowed, and because they're let loose on an environment where daddy up on the top floor says, hey, it doesn't matter what you do, the marketing machine is going to allow us to keep making money, we will be fine, don't worry about it. And when you allow that to happen, ultimately, products, innovation, stories, historical accuracy, and the way that you treat your customers suffers. So if you're shielded from everything, you're told you're always right, and whenever somebody does criticize you for something, you're told to not listen to them, what do you expect the final product is going to look like if not an out-of-touch mess? To what extremes does that screw up a game? Well, at least within business practices, now Ubisoft has to listen. Unfortunately, it is too late for Assassin's Creed Shadows to really change their minds on that. But if you want a real example, let's get into the second part of this. But wait, because first we have the part of the video that a lot of you don't like, but I'm gonna be honest. I take sponsors that are not only good for this channel, but good for you watching. That today is Instant Gaming. I've been using them since 2017 because I'll save money wherever I can. And these guys have absolutely great deals on all sorts of games, PC, console, previous releases, new releases, and pre-orders of upcoming games. Everything. They're not a marketplace like certain other websites. It's all them and everything comes from authorized distributors. And because it's all them, they can offer that 24/7 customer support with a guarantee that they'll fix whatever your problem is. And the best part about Instant Gaming is that I don't have to sell you on it. I just have to tell you that there's a link in the description below where you can check out all of the prices on stuff. I would recommend Metaphor Rifantatio because that game looks like it's gonna be awesome. The demo was, at least. There's just a ton of absolutely amazing games all the time. And we don't have infinite money. So whenever I can save money, I do so. And I recommend you do the same. You can click the link in the description to check out the prices over at Instant Gaming. And a very special thanks to them for sponsoring this video. And now, part 2. Concord, Sony's golden child. The recent leaks regarding Concord paint an incredibly dire picture of the entire industry, where I am sure that similar things are happening all across, at the very minimum within Sony. For those of you who were unaware, there's been a lot of information revealed on Concord, not all of it just yet, but aside from things that are a bit more contentious or need a little bit more digging, like the alleged $400 million budget, what we do have pretty solid from different sources is the culture of toxic positivity and the general atmosphere around the development of Concord. And this explains so much of how a game can absolutely be destroyed by hubris. Concord was brought into Sony as a project that would be a vision for the future of PlayStation, something to define the brand for years and years to come. A Star Wars level franchise, 30 years of Concord. And while it was brought along during the days of Jim Ryan, who famously wanted 12 live service projects for PlayStation, it was also backed by who is the current CEO, Herman Hulst. Many people have said that Herman is going to be the savior of PlayStation and take them out of their remake spree where they are seemingly incapable of actually just delivering new games. Here's hoping Ghost of Yotei is good. Herman Hulst apparently had Concord picked as the golden child for Sony. The PS5 Pro was meant to have a lot of push thanks to Concord. The image we're told of Concord is that of a street urchin being picked off of the slums, as they are told, "Boy, you shall one day be king." And while that's already dangerous within itself, Firewalk, the development team behind Concord, was already filled with some pretty big names, including Ryan Ellis, who was a director on Destiny 2, who brought in a lot of that team, along with industry veterans who had worked on very successful games before. And they seem to have been handpicked for a super squad of veterans to make Concord. Are you seeing where this is a problem? From there, when the project was in dire straits, Sony just decided to keep pumping money in and created this sort of bubble to insulate them from the rest of the world. Everything that they did was right. They were the chosen ones, and they needn't worry because no matter what they did, Concord would be a success, even to the point where we have rumblings that towards the end of development, the game was in a very bad state, but the team believed that because they were so good, they would find a way to get it past the finish line no matter what. And I think this makes total sense because let's stop for a second. Concord is a game that started development 8 years ago and feels like it should have been released 6 years ago. It's a game that feels like it hasn't learned anything from every other live service that has released in the last 6 years, and it didn't even learn the right lessons from the games that came out 8 years ago when it started development. And if you're wondering how anybody could be so out of touch as to look at Concord and say, this is the future of gaming, if anybody could play Concord and not look and point out its glaring flaws over and over and over again, well, I think we have an answer. It's somebody who's been shielded from everything for the last 6 years. This paints a picture so destructive that not just did they tell them that everything they were doing was right, it seems like they blocked them off from the rest of the world. So everything that everyone else did was wrong. And it's this level of coddling, of creating this super bubble where that criticism doesn't exist, that leads to the tremendous flop of Concord, that leads to the way that these people conducted the development of it, and how everybody had these expectations for it without ever really realizing, without ever taking a step back from it and saying, wait, we don't even have a core game mode that sets us apart from the rest of the market. Our characters are designed confusingly and also ugly. Our maps are boring. There's nothing here for anyone to ever care, and they're also going to charge $40 for this? Are they insane? Nobody ever did that. And we've seen this happen before, and I think we're gonna see it happen again. Sony has 6 live service projects lined up for the PS5. The first one was Helldivers, the second one was Concord, and as far as we know, the third one is Fair Games. Now, if at any point this sounds similar to Concord, stop me. Fair Games is done by Haven Studios, a studio founded by Jade Raymond of Assassin's Creed fame. Everything comes back, doesn't it? Now, Jade Raymond, despite not having that many credits to her name, has the reputation of being very involved as a producer on the games that she worked on, and she did make some really great games. So she's been a figurehead and quite a public one in the industry, especially way above just how many real credits she has. And her team, consisting of highly talented and experienced developers, is working on a live service PvPvE sort of heist extraction game called Fair Games, that while we only have the cinematic trailer for it, does not seem to be offering anything beyond slight edginess that seems rooted in Watch Dogs 2. I really couldn't tell you that this game has an identity, even though at least the live service it's chasing is a little bit different than other things like just a multiplayer shooter, so that will play in its benefit, I imagine. And also, half of the footage I've been showing you is actually of Sega's Hyenas, and you probably didn't notice. See what I did there? I did one of those cool tricks that YouTubers do where we trick you, but you actually think like, oh, but that helped prove the point. Yeah, we're gonna get to Hyenas in a moment. This is all Fair Games now. So what you're telling me is that within the same scheme that produced Concord from Ryan Ellis and his elite team, we now have Jade Raymond and her elite team making another live service game that is probably very coddled and being told that everything they're doing is great. And I really do, at this point, single out Jade Raymond as the person to keep this on track. Otherwise, her reputation, I think, is very much on the line. Because if Sony is trying to instill these toxic positivity bubbles and nobody inside the studio is taking the steps out to look at it and say, hey, maybe our visual identity is incredibly generic and boring at this point. Maybe the core concepts of this game don't work. Maybe we're not doing anything worthwhile here. And changing that around, yeah, we're in for another flop, and I think that the reason for it will be the same hubris. Will be placing games in a bubble, thinking that they're too big to fail, that they have the Sony machine behind them, and then in the end, being so delusional that you put out a game that nobody wanted to play to begin with. Now, I don't want that for Fair Games. I don't want games to fail. I constantly have to repeat that on the channel because there's tons of talented people and money and resources and ideas and passion that go to waste when they're spent on these terrible projects that go nowhere. And I'd much rather people, put them into something good. But I'm pretty sure that there's a bigger trend forming over at Sony from what we've heard, and that's worrying, because hubris didn't just kill Concord or is threatening Fair Games. It also killed Hyenas, a game with so much hubris that its entire identity was, hey, we're made by Sega, Do you like Sega? Look, Sonic. Look, retro stuff. I don't know. Look, Sega stuff. You like Sega? It's this self-congratulatory fan service nature of it that existed to substitute an identity that ultimately made it feel like the most cynical thing ever, to the point that it never even released. I have a quote here from Mandalore Gaming, a YouTuber that doesn't normally even use this sort of language, so you know how bad this was when he played Hyenas. Hyenas is one of the most absolutely cynical games I've played in my life, which is one hell of a bar. It makes the tone of something like Borderlands seem utterly sincere. You're assaulted with visual clutter and noise constantly, and it has Ready Player One levels of cheap nostalgia banking. The highlight of these was when Brendan found a giant computer that just said 80s on it, because fuck it. Radical Heights and Lawbreakers now seem coherent. So they had uninspired gameplay without a real core to make it fun, and they were banking on, with a lot of hubris, that the identity of Sega and retro nostalgia would be enough to make this game popular. How could it fail? We're using our IP, and our IP is loved by everybody. Come on, guys. But so we reach part 3. Bethesda. Bethesda's not doing so great. They just released the Shattered Space expansion for Starfield, which review up on the channel very soon. And while I haven't found it to be offensive, I also haven't found it to be good. And what's really interesting about it is that it's Bethesda admitting defeat on a lot of the things that they introduced in Starfield, and going back to that kind of closed, open area from all of their other expansions, things like Far Harbor or Point Lookout or the Shivering Isles. And even then, it feels like it's lacking in a lot of quality and vision in a lot of areas where other Bethesda games have had that. It does improve on many areas that Bethesda has been lacking in before, but it does not improve on any of the fundamentals, because it's still Starfield. But the biggest problem is that people aren't playing Shattered Space. The numbers on launch day for the expansion were basically 5,000 more than the people who were playing it the day before, up to a whopping 20,000 concurrent players on Steam, and I think that's normally a good metric. People have stopped caring about Bethesda, and the question here is, why? And the answer, I believe, once again, is hubris. Bethesda Game Studios in many ways has had a patent on their brand of RPG. A brand that is very beloved and has been for many years, but that has grown old with time, that technologically has not kept up with what people wanted from it, and that additionally, with their internal ambition to create newer projects being hamstrung by that technology. And much like Ubisoft, no matter how much critics or fans have told them what the issues are and how they need to innovate and expand on the ideas of their RPG systems, where fat needs to be trimmed and where ideas need to be expanded, Bethesda has not listened. All spearheaded by the marketing speak of Todd Howard in the way that they are pushing boundaries and evolving technology beyond anything you could believe while delivering results that are the complete opposite of what they promise. They have let their formula become stale. And as they have done this, they still believe that what they're making is going to stand the test of time and impress people. It is once again a studio that feels locked in time. Very ironic considering what's going on in the expansion of Starfield. I just realized that, sorry. And that's letting the rest of the industry pass them by, as even indies are trying to take up the mantle and innovating in ways that are interesting compared to what they are trying to do. At this point, I have more faith that Obsidian's Avowed will deliver something that at least moves forward in what this sort of RPG can do, compared to what Bethesda has been doing for the last 10 years. But what really exemplifies that hubris is the way that they truly believe that they are massive, that they are presenting things that are revolutionary, and the absolute confidence with which they give us games that are then badly received, very criticized, and that do not follow in anything that people want from them, and then proceed to complain and gaslight people and tell us that actually what they're doing is incredible, that we should appreciate what they've done with their engine, that we don't understand the hardships of making games, and just telling us that we're wrong. It is that same righteous energy from Ubisoft, but also that same locked in time and not willing to listen to the outside sources, not willing to look out into the industry and make meaningful changes in order to follow the steps that are being laid out by new and better games. It is a combination of part 1 and 2, and it's the saddest one because at this point, we're not even talking about Bethesda anymore. It's not a talking point, it's not news, and their downfall is just understood. Hubris is a silent and deadly killer that is taking more and more hold of the industry. We're seeing the impact of it day after day as these people hide their heads in the sand and pretend that criticism doesn't exist, as they create these game developer igloos to protect people from outside noise. No, don't listen to the critics, you're going to do a great job and the marketing machine is protecting you, and it doesn't matter what creative decisions you make. We're going to say that they're the best ones, we're going to put it out there and it's going to sell, and if anyone has a problem with it, we'll just tell them that they're wrong and they should shut up, that they're enemies to everybody. A world where any product is created without feedback, without constructive criticism, and without paying attention to the market around you is a sad one. But a world where video games that are this fusion of technological and creative expression do that is horrendous to me. And I really don't see a path forward unless these practices are completely eliminated from the industry. Thankfully, at the moment, we're only seeing it in a few key developers, in only some studios and some bigger corporate structures, like the case of Ubisoft or the case of Sony. But I do fear for a time when this becomes more commonplace. And as the world becomes more divided, and as everything especially becomes political even when it doesn't need to be, I really anticipate that more and more developers are going to be coddled in this way and lead to inferior products. And I'm not just talking about games that are worse, I'm talking about their stories being worse, their innovation being worse. I'm talking about every single part of the experience being so much worse that it could even be considered a regression. For us to get games that are locked in time from a different time period in all of the wrong ways. I'm not talking about that big PS2 energy. I am not talking about video games, because these aren't games that would rekindle certain things that we've lost. These are just games that are lost themselves. I've been Mug. Thank you for watching. That was anticlimactic. I mean, I think it was a good ending to the video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. That helps this video reach farther, helps grow the channel, and I think this is a message worth communicating. It's something that I personally am going to be looking out for more. When I detect any hint of hubris now coming from pretty much any studio, I'm gonna be very worried. Because in many ways, the arrogance of hubris is kind of the opposite of the wide-eyed passion that other developers approach their games with. And if you want more from me, remember to subscribe. The channel's been doing really well recently, and we're almost to 50,000 subscribers, which would be a huge deal. There's a lot of very good videos coming soon, so I think you want to subscribe for that. A very special thanks to my patrons up on the $1 wall. It's called that way because there's only one tier, $1. I will be redesigning it soon because I didn't expect there to be this many, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart every day. Your support means so much to me, and as always, thank you truly for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.